The truth about Benjamin Sesko at Manchester United. What really happened and what comes next. Welcome back to United Daily Updates, your most trusted source for everything Manchester United. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel where we bring you daily news, analysis, and honest discussions about our beloved club. We don't do clickbait here. We don't spread rumors. We give you the facts, the context, and the truth about what's really happening at Old Trafford. Today, we need to talk about something important. There's been a lot of confusion, misleading articles, and straight-up wrong information floating around about Benjamin Sesko and Manchester United striker situation. Some of these articles are getting thousands of shares, but they're painting a picture that just isn't accurate. So let's sit down, take our time, and really dig into what's actually going on with our new striker and what it means for the rest of the season. The hook. Why this matters more than you think. Here's something that will surprise you. Benjamin Sesko, our big money signing from the summer, has been at the club for 3 months now. 3 whole months. But if you read certain articles online, you'd think he just arrived yesterday and is already being written off as a failure. You'd think Manchester United are in panic mode, desperately searching for 4 different strikers to replace him in January. But here's the real question we should be asking. Why are so many people getting this story wrong? And more importantly, what's the truth about Sesko's start at United, his recent injury, and whether the club really needs to go back into the transfer market in January? This isn't just about one player. This is about understanding how modern football journalism works, how stories get twisted, and how we as fans can separate fact from fiction. It's about having realistic expectations for a 22-year-old striker adapting to the toughest league in the world. And it's about understanding what Ruben Amorim is actually building at Manchester United. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's break this down piece by piece. Part 1. Setting the record straight about Benjamin Sesko. Let's start with the basics because apparently, we need to remind some people of what actually happened this summer. Benjamin Sesko joined Manchester United in August 2025. The transfer fee was around €76.5 million, which works out to somewhere between £65 and £74 million depending on the exchange rate and how the payment structure works. This made him one of the most expensive signings in the club's history and definitely our biggest signing of the summer window. But here's what a lot of articles are missing. Sesko wasn't the only attacker we signed. United also brought in Matheus Cunha and Brian Buemo. That's 3 attacking players in one window. 3. This is important because when you read articles suggesting United are desperate for strikers and have no options, you have to wonder if the writer actually followed the transfer window or just forgot what happened 3 months ago. Now, let's talk about Sesko's performance so far. He's scored 2 goals in 12 matches. Is that amazing? No. Is it a disaster? Also no. And here's why context matters. Sesko is 22 years old. He came from RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga, which is a very different league from the Premier League. The speed is different. The physicality is different. The tactical approach is different. Even the weather is different. Anyone who has watched football for more than 5 minutes knows that adaptation takes time. Think about some of the greatest strikers who have played in the Premier League. How many of them hit the ground running immediately? Thierry Henry struggled in his first few months at Arsenal. Didier Drogba took time to find his feet at Chelsea. Even Erling Haaland, who broke records at Manchester City, had quiet patches in his first season. 2 goals in 12 games for a young striker adapting to a new league, a new team, a new manager, and a new country isn't a crisis. It's normal. It's part of the process. But you wouldn't know that from reading some of the panic pieces out there. Part 2. The injury that started all the rumors. On November 8, 2025, Manchester United played Tottenham Hotspur. The match ended 2-2, which was frustrating enough on its own. But during that game, Benjamin Sesko picked up a knee injury. And that's when things started getting messy in the media. After the match, Ruben Amorim spoke to the press. He mentioned that if Sesko's injury turned out to be serious, United might need to look at the transfer market in January. That's a perfectly reasonable thing for a manager to say. It's the kind of careful, considered statement that shows his thinking ahead and planning for different scenarios. But here's how journalism works in 2025. One manager says if the injury is serious, we might look at options, and within 24 hours, you've got articles saying United in crisis, must sign 4 strikers in January, Sesko experiment has failed. Do you see the difference? Do you see how one becomes the other? The good news is that the injury doesn't appear to be serious. Reports suggest it's not a long-term problem. The exact timeline for his return isn't confirmed yet, but we're talking weeks, not months. He could potentially be back for the busy festive period when United will be playing multiple games in quick succession. But even with this relatively good news, the articles kept coming. Lists of strikers United must sign. Transfer targets they desperately need. Panic and crisis and emergency measures. Why? Because panic gets clicks. Panic gets shares. Panic gets engagement. The truth, which is that United have a minor injury situation that they're managing sensibly, doesn't make for exciting headlines. Part 3. The 4 strikers United supposedly need. Let's look at the article that sparked this whole discussion. It suggested 4 strikers that Manchester United could target in the January window to help Benjamin Sesko. Let's go through them one by one and talk about what makes sense and what doesn't. Igor Thiago from Brentford. The article points out that Igor Thiago has been excellent for Brentford this season. Only Erling Haaland has scored more goals than him in the Premier League. That's impressive. Really impressive. The 24-year-old Brazilian has proven he can perform at the highest level in English football. But here's the thing. Thiago only joined Brentford from Club Brugge in the summer. He's been there for a few months. Brentford paid good money for him, and now he's proving to be worth every penny. What are the chances they're going to sell him in January? Close to 0. The article even admits this, saying that Brentford are tough negotiators. United already know this from trying to sign Bryan Mbeumo. Wait, Bryan Mbeumo? Didn't United actually sign Bryan Mbeumo in the summer? Yes. Yes, they did. Which makes it even stranger that this article is suggesting they need to sign another Brentford attacker. Brentford don't need to sell. Thiago is crucial to their team. They would demand an absolutely massive fee, probably £60 or £70 million at least. And for a player who has been in the Premier League for less than half a season, that's a huge risk. Is Thiago a good player? Absolutely. Should United sign him in January? Probably not. Does it make sense to sign him when we already have Sesko, Cunha, and Mbeumo? Definitely not. Dusan Vlahovic from Juventus. Now this one is more interesting. Dusan Vlahovic is a proven goalscorer. He's 25 years old, experienced at the highest level, and his contract at Juventus expires in 2026. That's the key detail. He's in the final 18 months of his deal. The article suggests United could potentially get him on a free transfer if they wait until his contract expires, or they could negotiate a lower fee in January because Juventus won't want to lose him for nothing in the summer. This actually makes some sense from a pure transfer market perspective. Players in the final year or two of their contracts often move for reduced fees. Juventus would be under pressure to sell rather than lose him for free. Vlahovic has scored 6 goals in 15 appearances this season. That's decent, though not spectacular. He's a good striker who has proven he can score in Serie A. The question is whether he's the right fit for what Ruben Amorim wants to do at Manchester United. But here's the bigger question. Why would United sign a 25-year-old striker on big wages when they just spent £74 million on a 22-year-old striker 3 months ago? What message does that send to Sesko? What does it say about the club's planning and strategy? If United wanted Vlahovic, they should have signed him in the summer instead of Sesko. You can't sign one expensive young striker and then immediately start looking for another expensive striker to replace him. That's not how you build a team. That's not how you develop young players. That's not how you create stability. Ivan Toney from Al Ahly. This suggestion is honestly a bit bizarre. Ivan Toney moved to Saudi Arabia in the summer. He joined Al Ahly and has been scoring goals there. 11 goals in 15 appearances is a good return. The article suggests that Toney might want to return to the Premier League in January because he needs to play in Europe to have a chance of making England's World Cup squad. Thomas Tuchel, the new England manager, is apparently only calling up one recognised striker, and Toney won't be in contention if he stays in Saudi Arabia. Let's think about this logically. Toney left the Premier League for Saudi Arabia because they offered him life-changing money. We're talking about wages that Premier League clubs simply cannot compete with. He made a choice. He chose financial security over sporting ambition, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's his career and his decision. But now we're supposed to believe he's going to give up that massive salary and come back to England after just a few months? Really? And if he does want to leave, why would Al Ahly let him go? They just signed him. They're paying him a fortune. They're not going to just wave goodbye after half a season. And even if all of that somehow worked out, why would Manchester United want him? Toney is 29 years old. He's a good striker, no doubt about that. His last full season at Brentford saw him score 20 goals in 33 appearances. But he's not young. He's not the future. He's not what United should be building around. If United sign Ivan Toney in January, it means they've given up on Benjamin Sesko after less than 6 months. It means they're going for short-term fixes instead of long-term planning. It means they've learned nothing from years of chaotic transfer strategy. Should United sign Ivan Toney? No. Will they? Almost certainly not. Does this suggestion make sense? Not really. Jean-Philippe Mateta from Crystal Palace. The final suggestion is Jean-Philippe Mateta. The Crystal Palace striker scored 14 goals in the Premier League last season, which was a really good return. This season he has 6 goals in 11 matches, which shows he's maintaining that form. At 28 years old, Mateta is an experienced striker who understands the Premier League. He's a physical presence, good in the air, and has proven he can score goals consistently. There's a lot to like about him as a player. But once again, we have to ask the same questions. Why would Crystal Palace sell him in January? He's crucial to their team. Oliver Glasner, their manager, has built his system around Mateta's strengths. Palace are not in a position where they need to sell. The article admits this, pointing out that Palace are already losing Marc Guéhi on a free transfer in the summer. They're not going to want to lose another key player, especially not mid-season. If United came calling, Palace would demand an absolutely huge fee. We're probably talking £50 million or more for a 28-year-old striker. Is that good value? Is that smart business? For a player who will be 29 by the time next season starts? For a player who doesn't have a massive resale value? For a player who you're buying to compete with or replace the £74 million striker you signed 3 months ago? The answer to all those questions is no. Part 4. What's really going on here? So we've looked at 4 strikers that Manchester United supposedly need to sign in January. And in every single case, we've found problems with the suggestion. Either it doesn't make financial sense, or it doesn't make sporting sense, or it doesn't make logical sense. But the bigger issue is this. Why are these articles being written in the first place? What's the real story here? The real story is that Benjamin Sesko picked up a minor injury. That's it. That's the whole story. A young striker who is still adapting to the Premier League got injured in a match. It happens. It's part of football. It's not a crisis. It's not a disaster. It's just one of those things that happens during a long season. Ruben Amorim, being a sensible manager, said that if the injury turns out to be serious, the club might need to look at options. That's good management. That's planning ahead. That's thinking about different scenarios. But the injury isn't serious, so it's not really relevant. But somehow, this minor injury to a player who has been at the club for 3 months has become a reason to write articles about how United are in crisis and need to sign 4 different strikers immediately. Do you see how disconnected that is from reality? Here's what's actually happening. Manchester United signed 3 attackers in the summer. Benjamin Sesko, Matheus Cunha, and Bryan Mbeumo. That's a lot of investment in the attack. The club clearly believes in these players. They clearly have a plan. Sesko is young and adapting. That takes time. Cunha has experience in the Premier League from his time at Wolves. Mbeumo has been excellent at Brentford for years. These are good players who are still learning to play together in a new system under new manager. The problem isn't that United don't have enough attackers. The problem is that people expect immediate results. They expect a 22-year-old to come from another country and immediately score 20 goals a season. They expect a team with a new manager and several new players to click instantly. That's not realistic. That's not how football works. Part 5. The Joshua Zirkzee situation. There's another layer to this story that we need to address. The article mentions Joshua Zirkzee and suggests that United might sell him in January. It says they could get up to £21 million based on Transfermarkt's valuation. This is interesting because it reveals something about how the club is thinking. Zirkzee joined United last summer, but has struggled to establish himself in the team. Under Ruben Amorim, he doesn't seem to be part of the plans. The manager apparently isn't willing to use him. If United do sell Zirkzee in January, it would free up some wages and bring in a bit of money. But it would also leave them thinner in attack. And this is where the whole sign 4 strikers narrative comes from. If Zirkzee leaves and Sesko is injured, suddenly you're relying heavily on Cunha and maybe using Mbeumo through the middle even though he's more naturally a winger. But here's the thing. If United sell Zirkzee, it should be because he's not good enough or doesn't fit the system. It shouldn't trigger a panic buy of multiple strikers. It should just be a case of streamlining the squad and focusing on the players who are actually going to contribute. The money from selling Zirkzee isn't going to fund a major signing anyway. £21 million doesn't go very far in today's market. It might cover half the fee for someone like Mateta. It's not enough for Vlahovic. It's nowhere near enough for Igor Thiago. So even if this happens, it doesn't really change the fundamental situation. United still have Sesko as their main striker, with Cunha and Mbeumo as support options. That should be enough for the rest of the season. Part 6. Understanding Ruben Amorim's vision. Let's talk about Ruben Amorim for a minute. He's relatively new at Manchester United, having taken over the job this season. He came from Sporting CP, where he built a reputation as one of the most exciting young managers in Europe. Amorim has a clear philosophy. He likes his teams to be organized, disciplined, and tactically flexible. He wants players who can play in multiple positions. He values intelligence and work rate as much as pure talent. And he's known for developing young players. That last point is crucial. Amorim is known for developing young players. At Sporting, he turned several prospects into stars. He gave them time, he worked with them on the training ground, he gradually increased their responsibilities. And the results spoke for themselves. So when United signed a 22-year-old striker for £74 million in the summer, it was clearly with Amorim's input and approval. This is his kind of signing. A young player with huge potential who needs coaching and development to reach his peak. That's what Amorim does best. Now imagine if United abandon that plan after 3 months. Imagine if they sign a 28 or 29-year-old striker in January because Sesko has only scored 2 goals. What message does that send to Amorim? What message does it send to Sesko? What message does it send to every other young player at the club? It would be a disaster. It would undermine everything Amorim is trying to build. It would show that United haven't learned from their mistakes of the past, when they chased short-term fixes instead of building for the future. Jason Wilcox, United's director of football, recently spoke about the club's transfer strategy. He talked about signing players who can plug and play in the Premier League. Players who already understand the league and can contribute immediately. That's why they signed Mbeumo from Brentford. That's why they were interested in players like Igor Thiago. But plug and play doesn't mean giving up on younger players who need time. It means having a balanced squad with experienced players who can contribute immediately and younger players who are developing. You need both. You can't just have one or the other. United have that balance now. Mbeumo and Cunha are experienced Premier League players. Sesko is the younger option with higher potential. That's a good mix. That's smart planning. Throwing it all away after 3 months would be madness. Part 7. The reality of January transfers. Let's talk about the January transfer window for a minute. Because there's this idea floating around that clubs can just go out and buy whoever they want in January, and it's going to solve all their problems. But that's not how it works in reality. January is the hardest window to do business in. Why? Because clubs don't want to sell their best players mid-season. If a striker is scoring goals and helping his team, why would that club let him leave halfway through the campaign? They wouldn't, unless you offer them an absolutely crazy amount of money. This is why January signings are usually either players who aren't playing much at their current club, players from weaker leagues who are seen as low-risk punts, experienced players who can provide cover, or depth panic buys that clubs end up regretting. Very rarely do you see elite players move in January. Very rarely do you see transfers that really transform a team's season. It happens occasionally, but it's the exception, not the rule. So when people suggest United should sign Igor Thiago in January, they're ignoring reality. Brentford are fighting for European places. Thiago is their top scorer. They're not selling him. It doesn't matter how much money United offer. Well, okay, if United offered £100 million they might consider it, but that's not happening. Same with Mateta at Crystal Palace. Same with anyone who is actually performing well for their team. These players aren't available in January unless something goes very wrong at their club or there's some kind of behind-the-scenes drama. The only realistic option from that list is Vlahovic, and only because his contract situation forces Juventus to consider offers. But even then, there will be competition from other clubs. Paris Saint-Germain reportedly want him. So do Bayern Munich. So do Tottenham. It's not going to be a simple transfer. And here's another thing about January. Even if you do manage to sign someone, they need time to settle in. They need to learn the system, build relationships with teammates, adapt to new surroundings. January signings often don't really contribute until the following season. So you're spending big money for a player who might not actually help you much in the short term anyway. This is why most smart clubs avoid big moves in January unless they absolutely have to. They plan their business for the summer when there's more time to get everything right. Part 8. What United should actually do. So if United shouldn't panic and sign multiple strikers in January, what should they do? Let's talk about some sensible options. First, they should support Benjamin Sesko. Give him time to recover from his injury. Keep working with him on the training ground. Be patient with his adaptation process. Remember that he's 22 years old and has plenty of time to develop. 2 goals in 12 games isn't great, but it's not a reason to give up on a player who cost £74 million after just a few months. Second, they should maximize what they already have. Mateus Cunha is an experienced striker who has played in the Premier League before. Brian Bumo can play through the middle if needed, even though he's more natural on the wing. Marcus Rashford is still at the club and can fill in as a striker in emergencies. There are options there. Third, they should only go into the market if a really special opportunity comes up. If a player becomes available who genuinely improves the squad and fits the budget and the system, then yes, consider it. But don't just sign someone for the sake of signing someone. Don't panic buy because of one injury. Fourth, they should think about the summer. If Sesko doesn't work out, if the goals don't come, if it becomes clear he's not the answer, then yes, United will need to go back into the market. But do it in the summer when there are more options, more time to negotiate, and more clarity about what's needed. Fifth, they should trust Ruben Amorim. He's the manager. He knows the squad better than anyone. If he thinks they need reinforcements, he'll tell the board. If he thinks they can make do with what they have, trust his judgment. That's why you hire a good manager in the first place. The reality is that United's season isn't going to be decided by whether they sign a striker in January or not. It's going to be decided by how well the team plays together, how quickly they adapt to Amorim's system, and whether the players they already have can step up and deliver. Part 9. The bigger picture about transfer journalism. We need to talk about something important here. This whole situation with Sesko and the striker articles is a perfect example of how modern football journalism works, and not in a good way. There's a huge industry built around transfer speculation. Websites need clicks. YouTube channels need views. Twitter accounts need engagement. And the best way to get all of that is to create drama and panic. So you take a minor injury to a young striker, add some manager quotes taken slightly out of context, throw in a list of potential targets, and suddenly you have a crisis that needs solving with multiple emergency signings. None of it is based on reality, but it doesn't matter because people are clicking and sharing and discussing. The problem is that this creates unrealistic expectations among fans. When you read article after article about how United must sign 4 strikers, you start to believe it. You start to think that anything less is a failure. You start to panic along with the articles. But the people writing these articles often don't have inside information. They're not speaking to decision makers at the club. They're just speculating and presenting it as if it's news. Sometimes they're just making stuff up to fill space and get clicks. This is why it's so important to be critical consumers of media. When you read an article about transfers, ask yourself some questions. Does this make sense? Is this based on facts or speculation? What's the source of this information? Does the timeline add up? Are there any obvious contradictions? In the case of the article about United needing 4 strikers, the contradictions are everywhere. It says United are desperate for attacking options while ignoring that they signed 3 attackers in the summer. It suggests signing players from clubs that have no reason to sell mid-season. It presents January as a time when United can just go shopping, when reality is much more complicated. Being a smart football fan means being able to spot these things. It means not getting swept up in every rumor and panic story. It means understanding the difference between genuine news and speculation designed to get clicks. Part 10. Learning from past mistakes. Manchester United have made a lot of transfer mistakes over the years. Everyone knows this. The club has wasted hundreds of millions of pounds on players who didn't work out. They've been chaotic in the market, signing players without a clear plan, changing direction every time a new manager arrives. Some examples. Remember when United signed Radamel Falcao on loan when he was past his best? Remember when they paid huge money for Alexis Sanchez and he completely flopped? Remember when they bought Romelu Lukaku and then sold him after 2 years? Remember when they signed Edinson Cavani as a short-term fix and then struggled when he left? The pattern is clear. United have repeatedly gone for short-term solutions, older players on big wages, panic buys to fix immediate problems. And it's rarely worked out well. This is exactly what people are suggesting they do now with Sesko. He's had 3 months and scored 2 goals, so let's sign a 28 or 29-year-old striker to replace him. Let's abandon the long-term plan for a quick fix. Let's repeat the same mistakes we've made for the past decade. The smart thing, the thing a well-run club would do, is learn from those mistakes. Stick with the plan. Give young players time to develop. Build for the future rather than just trying to survive the present. Trust the manager and the recruitment team to get it right. There are examples of clubs who do this well. Liverpool stuck with Mohamed Salah when he had a slow start. Manchester City were patient with Bernardo Silva. Arsenal gave Bukayo Saka time to develop. All of these players are now world-class because their club showed patience and belief. United need to show the same patience and belief with Sesko. He's 22 years old. He's adapting to a new league. He's learning a new system. He's dealing with a minor injury. All of this is normal. All of this is part of the process. Giving up after 3 months would be a huge mistake. Part 11. The financial reality. Let's talk about money for a minute, because that's an important part of this discussion that often gets ignored in transfer articles. Manchester United spent huge amounts of money in the summer. Benjamin Sesko cost £74 million. Matheus Cunha and Brian Bumo also cost significant fees. The club invested heavily in attack. Now, United are a rich club, no doubt about that. But even rich clubs have budgets. Even rich clubs need to comply with financial fair play rules. Even rich clubs can't just spend unlimited amounts every transfer window. If United go back into the market in January and spend another £50 or £60 million on a striker, what does that mean for the summer? What does it mean for other positions that need strengthening? What does it mean for the club's ability to compete financially over the next few years? And more importantly, what does it say about the summer business? If you spend £74 million on a striker and then spend another £50 million on a different striker 6 months later, you've basically admitted that the first transfer was a mistake. You've wasted £74 million. That's not good business. That's not smart planning. The article mentions that United could get £21 million from selling Joshua Zirkzee. Even if that happens, it's not nearly enough to fund a major signing. And it doesn't address the bigger issue, which is that United have already made huge investments in attack that they need to see through. Smart clubs make transfers work. They give players time. They support their investments. They don't just abandon expensive signings after a few months because things aren't going perfectly. That's how you end up with a bloated squad full of expensive mistakes. Part 12. What success actually looks like. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. What does success actually look like for Benjamin Sesko this season? Is it 20 goals in all competitions? That would be great, but it's probably not realistic for a player in his first season at a new club. Is it 15 goals? That's more achievable. Is it 10 goals? That would be okay for a first season, especially if he's contributing in other ways. The truth is that success for Sesko isn't just about the number of goals. It's about adaptation. It's about learning the system. It's about building relationships with teammates. It's about understanding the demands of the Premier League. It's about staying fit and available. It's about showing signs of improvement and potential. If Sesko finishes the season with 10 goals but shows clear signs of development, that's actually a decent first season. It's something to build on. It's a foundation for the future. Not every striker hits the ground running immediately. Think about someone like Roberto Firmino at Liverpool. He wasn't prolific in his first season, but he showed enough to suggest he would be a valuable player. And he was. He became crucial to Liverpool's success, even though he was never a 20-goal a-season striker. Or think about Kai Havertz at Chelsea in his first season. He struggled to score consistently, but the talent was obvious. He ended up scoring the goal that won them the Champions League. Sometimes patience pays off in unexpected ways. United need to have realistic expectations for Sesko. They need to judge him on more than just goals. They need to look at the complete picture of his performance and development. And they need to give him time. Part 13. The role of the fans. This is where you come in. This is where United fans as a collective group have an important role to play. When a young player is struggling, the easy thing to do is get on his back. Start criticizing him on social media. Call for him to be dropped or sold. Demand that the club sign someone else. That's the easy reaction, but it's not the helpful one. The helpful thing to do is support the player. Get behind him. Understand that he's going through a difficult adaptation period. Show some patience. Create an atmosphere where he can develop without too much pressure. This doesn't mean you can't be critical when it's deserved. If a player isn't trying or showing the right attitude, then yes, that deserves criticism. But if a player is working hard and just needs time to adapt, that's different. Sesko seems like a player who is trying. He's not hiding. He's not shirking responsibility. He's a young striker in a new country trying to find his feet. That deserves support, not abuse. The atmosphere at Old Trafford and the reaction on social media can make a huge difference to a player's confidence and performance. If Sesko feels like the fans are behind him, it will help him relax and play better. If he feels like everyone has already given up on him after 3 months, it will make everything harder. So the next time you read an article saying United need to sign 4 strikers to replace Sesko, maybe take a step back. Maybe question whether that's really the right analysis. Maybe remember that you've seen this pattern before and it hasn't worked out well. Part 14. Looking at other teams. It's worth looking at how other top teams handle situations like this, Because United aren't the only club who have signed expensive strikers who needed time to adapt. Arsenal signed Gabriel Jesus from Manchester City. He started well, then struggled with injuries and form. Did Arsenal immediately go out and sign someone else? No. They stuck with him, brought him along gradually, and now he's an important player for them. Chelsea signed Nicholas Jackson last season. He had ups and downs in his first year. Some Chelsea fans wanted him sold. But the club stuck with him, and now in his second season he's looking much better. The adaptation period made him stronger. Tottenham have had a similar situation with Richarlison. He wasn't prolific in his first season at the club. There were calls for him to be sold or replaced. But Spurs kept faith, and has proven to be a valuable squad member. The pattern is clear. Good clubs show patience. They understand that expensive signings need time. They don't panic after a few months. They stick with the plan. United need to be like those clubs. They need to show the same patience and belief that the best-run clubs show. That's how you build a successful team over time. Part 15. The January Window Prediction. So what's actually going to happen in January? Let me give you my honest prediction. I don't think Manchester United will sign a striker in January unless something completely unexpected happens. The club knows that Sesko's injury isn't serious. They know they have other options. They know that January is a difficult window to do business in. And they know that signing someone would send the wrong message about their summer business. The club might look at other positions. Midfield depth could be an area of concern. Defensive cover might be needed. But a striker? I'd be very surprised. There will be lots of rumors, of course. Every striker in Europe will be linked with United at some point between now and February. Journalists will write articles about crisis and panic and emergency signings. But most of it will be noise. The reality will be that United stick with what they have, support Sesko through his injury and adaptation period, and judge the situation again in the summer when they have more time and options. If Xerxes leaves, maybe they'll bring in someone on loan as short-term cover. Maybe they'll promote a young player from the academy. But I don't see them making a major investment in January. And honestly, that's probably the right decision. That's the sensible, patient approach that good clubs take.